Hey guys, and welcome back to City Skylines. Today, aside from these apartment buildings and the occasional McDonald's, I'll work on the university campus slash college slash hospital, and though I won't entirely finish it, since I want to leave the more intricate details and foliage for some other time, which I'm not quite sure yet when in the future it's gonna be, but it's not gonna be in the very near future yet. But I will finish the basic design layouts and all of the buildings in this campus, and hopefully be able to create some good campus along the way, because I sure have never built or even imagined to try and make a university campus in my life. But yeah, hopefully at least my thought processes during this video will be a good insight. Anyway, the basic idea behind this university campus you can already sort of see laid out over here, since I want to have that circle in the middle, sort of the very central plaza of the university, where I want to have the most important buildings, such as the university center and the library at some point in the future, and this pedestrian road which sort of extends from it all the way to the quote-unquote official entrance of the campus will be where I really want to add all the buildings alongside, as soon as I actually remove all of those parks, because I still don't have that mod which allows you to get rid of the goals that come with parks. But yeah, the very idea of this campus is then to, even though this is a campus which still has a reasonable size, make a campus which still feels quite, I wouldn't say necessarily cozy, but still atmospheric, not feel too large and intimidating, and at the very least be pedestrian friendly. I really want to make use of shared space over here. So this entire plaza and the pedestrian sort of boulevard, you could say, is going to be used by just pedestrians and cyclists, some cars I suppose that really need to use it, but it's going to be mainly to make sure that everything in a university can be reached from this one sort of central place, and that everything's not too far away and too large, even though there are still going to be quite a large number of buildings on this campus. And I'll try to get the necessary car and other transport ways sort of tucked away at the back of the buildings, not right here alongside this little boulevard, since I really want to make sure that you don't have to worry about any car users and make this campus much more accessible. So really, I'll lay down all of the buildings nearly alongside this boulevard. I do have to say that since they were placed alongside the road on the other side, it doesn't quite work with all the buildings. Like, some of the buildings at least have a back which looks just as good, if not better, than the front. But some buildings you can really tell that you're looking at the back, but technically I sort of want the front of the building to be facing the plaza. So that is an issue for a couple of buildings, like the high schools, which I sort of am using not as high schools. But overall, I am quite happy with how it works as a layout so far, and most of the work is definitely in trying to make the paths look convincingly connected and creating an atmosphere with planters, details alongside the paths, and making sure that all the buildings are easily connected that way. I really also just went for this setup, since it is quite a compact setup and you don't end up with buildings that are too far apart. Everything is quite manageable from either the train station or where the future bus stops are gonna be, and you don't really need to use even your bike to get to the other side of the campus, and it should at least make it not too large and intimidating, I hope. There will be a couple of buildings sort of outside the central plaza, of course, but not too many actually. I really want to keep it, especially alongside here, just so that everything is sort of equal, that everything can be seen from one place in the university, and that it just feels a bit more connected. That sounded way too philosophical, but yeah, that's the general idea behind this campus, which I'm really bad at wording. I also really wanted to make this campus a very shared space, so not just endless university buildings, but also just figured I would have the hospital in here, much like there is actually also a medical campus in Rotterdam, and I was really just figuring a hospital in any other place would have worked within the city, but at least by keeping it over here you add a bit of life to the campus, especially given how otherwise in vacations you would have a pretty empty place that's very dead. Also wanted to have that quick Albert Heijn over there, just to make sure that, you know, just not just students, but at least you can shop over here, and you can tell it's pretty, yeah, it's actually very popular already. Aside from that, of course, there is a sort of shared feeling of all the different types of buildings over here, although it's really just hypothetical since many of these buildings are technically high schools. I just want to ignore that fact for a second and figure that many of these buildings belong to many different faculties within the university, but they are all sort of placed alongside the central road. There's no real idea of different clusters of buildings or buildings being very far apart in the university. They all sort of are along the same road, very close to each other, and sort of feel very equal and similar in that regard. I also just wanted to have a very quick McDonald's and tank station over here, just because I should say petrol station. But yeah, just because I really figured I didn't want this to be entirely empty, and I didn't have a McDonald's in this city yet, and that is probably a big sin when it comes to making cities. So yeah, realistically, I really wanted to have a McDonald's over here. Aside from that though, I wanted to add a small hill on this side, just to make sure that the people behind there on the very newly built neighborhood don't have too many issues with the sound that the highway creates. And you quite often see, especially in these newer neighborhoods in the Netherlands, that there is this hill between the highway and the living areas, and in this case it was especially handy because I still haven't really found any realistically Dutch highway barriers, which you often see made out of concrete and glass, and really couldn't find those, so a hill is really about the best option I could have as a sound barrier for the highway. Not really much else is going to be added to this part. I really figured it's most realistic if I just keep it empty and not over decorate it with different types of foliage, but really just keep it empty and grass. Anyway, moving back to the university, I also wanted to make sure that since I have this very large space of just pavement, that I got some more trees in there, because if there's anything that's really good at creating a nice atmosphere and making an area feel quite natural, it's just by adding lots of trees. So really wanted to have that in there. In the future, I definitely want to add some more planters, really just adding the basic decorations and shapes which I want to have over here. But in the future, I definitely want to have more foliage overall in the campus. It still feels a bit empty, which I think is mainly due to the fact that the pedestrian street in the middle of the university is so wide and that plaza is quite large. So foliage-wise, I am far from done, even at the end of this episode. But, you know, overall, I'm really quite happy about it, and have plenty of garden spaces in here as well. There's sort of that balance that I also wanted to strike with making the university campus at least feel very compact and dense, and keeping all the buildings quite closely packed together, and but at the same time at least keep some distance for some gardens and some paths and some more relaxed areas in between them. And there was also this idea of I really wanted to have these larger plazas and areas where you could walk around and relax at, but also really wanted to have these more grassy areas and forests and parks. So really wanted to find the balance between that as well, which I'm not sure if I have entirely hit it, because especially the pedestrian plaza in the middle does feel quite wide, and I may very well in the future, at least that's my current planning, add some extra planters, especially for trees in the middle there, to at least make the foliage a bit more dense. Other than that, the foliage and decorations are quite straightforward. It's really just a park-like setup with different curved paths from gravel, with some benches and some areas to relax. And what I probably should have done a little bit more, if I look back at it in retrospect, is add some of these artsy style sculptures. As much as I'm not a really big fan of them, it's something you do see quite often, and something which I could have gone into a little bit more. But yeah, that's all in hindsight. That's definitely something I still want to get to in the entire campus. But yeah, like I said, I really just wanted to get the overall shape done over here. And this area over here is really the main place to be. Not just in how I wanted to decorate it, at that fountain and benches for people to sit and, I don't know, spend their spare time in, but also really where I wanted to focus the most important buildings around. So it's logically also the place where you can most easily access every single other part of the university. And another part which I haven't really talked about how I wanted to set up this university campus is something that I sort of wanted to make the edges feel very non-existent, like slowly make it transition into the rest of the world by adding these larger areas of grass and slowly making it less dense around the edges and actually having more parks around there. I really wanted to make sure that the campus wouldn't feel too closed off on its own. An important thing, I think, is to keep in mind that your campus, for me at least, a campus shouldn't be very closed off and feel like its own institution, which doesn't welcome any people from the outside. So really wanted to make sure that there are sort of parks and roads around the edges which connect the outside world to the university and sort of slowly, gradually transition from the parks and empty grasslands outside of the university into where all the buildings are located. Also, very importantly, I added a beer garden over there because this is a university campus, so I definitely need some place where the beer can flow. I figured that was a pretty important part. But yeah, as I've said before and really never really went into, I just sort of picked buildings which I figured fit most over here, but that does mean that it's all just sort of a fantasy, and it doesn't in the game realistically actually reflect a campus, since for instance that newest small building that I added was really just a I don't actually know the English word for it. I don't even know the Dutch words, but that's a place where you get work. Not quite sure what that's called again. Or many of these buildings are just high schools or technically office buildings. But oh well, they are all used by faculties of universities in this case. At least that's the idea. Here is also where you can probably see the most of an influence that I got by being inspired by some Dutch universities. I took quite a bit of inspiration from the University of Wageningen, especially with the larger square empty grasslands around this campus. Also quite a bit of inspiration from Utrecht, which also sort of has this grid-like setup, and also really has this sort of central lane going through it, even though in that case the central lane is used by cars, which I really wanted to avoid in this case and use shared space instead, which is all the rage, but yeah, I really feel it's quite a good thing to use. And there was one final thing I think, yeah, actually quite funny, was that I got multiple comments about maybe looking at the University of Tilburg, which actually also sort of shares this grid-like makeup, but it is a university with much more foliage. Really feels like it's in the middle of the forest, and as much as I wanted to work with parks around this campus, I wanted to avoid turning it into a real forest fest, since, well, the idea of this entire city is that it's located somewhere in South Holland, and you don't really see too many forests in South Holland, and really wanted to keep the area quite open and grass plainy, as you would very often see in this type of area. Also really just very quickly added a small bicycle bridge over there, though that's something I might change in the future. It's really just a simple thing, but there aren't actually, I don't think there are any bicycle bridges on the workshop which are very fancy and made with 3D models. Might want to look into that. But yeah, this is just perhaps a placeholder, perhaps something I'll keep in the future. Because truth be told, yeah, although this campus was made with the idea of different ways of transport in mind, that's also something which I haven't added yet, and I still need to get to adding the bus stations to the university, some place where buses can drop off and pick up people, because I haven't even started doing that yet, but I want to do that in a future episode in which I add the bus lines and do some overall public transport. Then there are also some bicycle paths. Obviously there's that one path which is supposed to connect this university to what is going to be a future town, which I think I'll start work on in the next episode. And there is obviously, of course, also this bicycle path over here, which is going to connect it to the center of the city. And of course there's also the train station, which directly connects to the train station near the center of the city itself. So hopefully in terms of transport, it should at least be good. That said, this entrance of the university, there are sort of two entrances. This one and the main entrance, which leads directly into that large boulevard going through the middle of it. I do want to change them both in the future a little bit, make them a bit more open, and over here remove this retail park. Because I really figured this would be a good place for a retail park, but looking back at it, and looking at the fact that it's so close to the stadium which I have over there, I think a sports park would be much better, and perhaps a good attempt to actually have some sports parks for the university, but also combine that with the sports and entertainment park, which is going to be here for the city in general. So that's actually something I want to change in the future. Not that I'm really unhappy with this retail park over here, but that's something I'll move to some other more outer part of the city at some point in the future. Anyway, that is going to be about it for the time-lapse for today, but I do still have a small real-time part in which I want to show off the university, so I'm handing it over to my past self here. So this is how things currently look. I don't want to show it off too much yet, since it's a little bit unfinished. I feel like the point where I now need to get to is to actually make it alive. This is definitely the overall layouts that I want to use and the different buildings that I want to use, but I really feel like it's something I like to refer to in Rollercoaster Tycoon as well. It's finished, but it doesn't have the touches yet of human activity. Like, it needs some lamps here and there, benches, litter bins, and also some kiosks with people just selling random stuff and trying to promote products and things like that. A bit of liveliness to it, but overall I'm quite happy about it, and it's pretty much finished this way. Only a couple of things that I do also want to work on in the future is I might want to get a bus stop either over here or over here, but that'll really come as soon as I start adding bus lines into the city, once the entire central road network is all finished. And the train station still needs stuff next to it, like parking places, but especially the bicycle stands, which is quite important for the Netherlands, and also some more shrubs and decorations around the paths and stuff like that is something I do want to have. But yeah, a more thorough explanation of what it's actually like. This is sort of the main boulevard, and I really wanted to make a campus, and to be quite honest, I don't have any experience with making any type of campus, but this was very much inspired by the campuses of Wageningen, Utrecht, that I've already mentioned, but I wanted to make sure that this university at least had a campus that was very pedestrian friendly. And so all the buildings, most of the buildings can be connected with one big pedestrian plaza over here, with lots of space, but there's also some green spaces, and the cars are sort of at the back of everything, and it makes sure that you can get everywhere by car, but the main focus is basically on making this very pedestrian friendly, and that's really the entire idea. And this is sort of the central plaza for the entire university, with these buildings sort of in a quasi-symmetrical setup like that, and I'm quite happy about it. It's spaced out, but it doesn't really feel too empty, and I think it's a type of campus that I could see myself walking around in. Anyway, next episode I'm gonna... Actually, no, I'm lying about that. Next episode will be a bit of a jump in time, since right now I want to take a bit of time off screen and work on some details, not just the details of the university campus, but also some details of the entire city. Things like, for instance, the train line doesn't have any fences next to it, so people can just walk right onto the train line. I want to add some more lights on these paths, some custom lights and benches and things like that, just little decorations all over the city, which I figured wouldn't really look too great in a time-lapse, and I just want to work on right now. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing, and in the next episode I have no idea what I'm actually gonna record, so thanks for watching, I suppose, and see you later.